Hello, welcome back to this Django e-commerce series. In this video, we are going to implement cart functionality where the user or the customer can be able to add product to the cart and as well view those products in the cart. We are going to split this implementation into two parts. We will have the first part whereby we will create models and also create add to cart functionality, and then in the next part which is part 2, we will integrate that functionality into our templates. Without further ado, let's dive in. So before we dive in, I will urge you, please consider subscribing to this channel and also turn on those notification bell so that you don't miss out. And also, if this is the first time for you to see this Django series, this is a series, so please check the entire series so that you can be updated to this point. Without saying too much, let's dive in. First of all, let me run the server so that we can check what we have managed to create over the time. Python manage.py run server, and I also need to run my tailwind css, so npx tailwind css input and output. And then if we go to the browser and say localhost, so far we have managed to create authentication system. Okay, if you didn't check this out, we also created backend where we also created products. We also created let's check out the backend so that we can see how everything fits in. So we created this backend whereby we will be able to add products to our website. We have product categories, we have product galleries or reviews. We created all this video and then we added social authentication. We also have this video in previous episodes. So in today's video, let's dive into implementing cart functionality. So the first thing that we will start with when implementing this cart functionality is we need to create an app. So we'll say Django admin start app and call that app carts. We go to carts. Here is our carts. Once we create our app, we go to our settings. So remember we had split our settings, so inside our base.py file and under installed apps, let's add that app that we just created called carts. So we'll say carts, and then let us go back to carts. We need to create models for this cart functionality. So we'll go to cart models. Here is our model. Now let's define. We will have two models. The first model will be the cart itself and the second model will be cart items, because that cart will hold cart items. So let's start with the cart. So we'll say class and say cart, and then is models. It inherits from models.model. Let's have the cart ID. So cart ID will be models dot character field, and then we'll have max length. Let me give it 30. Then let's have a date added equals to models dot date time field auto now add equals to true. So this is our first model. Let me have some string and let us return self dot cart ID. Basically, let me give you a brief explanation on how this cart functionality will work. We will create a cart, and this cart ID we will take the session of the user as our cart ID, and then we will have cart items that will be added to that cart, and then the system will check if the products that have been added to the cart items already exist, and if they exist, it only increments those products, and if they are not existing, it creates the new ones. Okay, so that is how we are going to approach it. So let's create another model and say class cart item, say cart item, which inherits from models.model, and then let's have the user. We need to have the user, so we need to associate the items to a specific user. So we need to import user. So from Django.contrib.auth.models import user. Okay, so we are going to use this user. So here in the user we need to say models dot foreign key, and then we pass in the user. So we need to associate each cart item to a specific user, and then let's have on delete model to say models dot cascade. We want on delete model dot cascade helps us if the user is being deleted from the system, as well the cart items are his own cart items are deleted as well. So let's add say blank equals to null, because we also intend to give that functionality to unauthenticated users, those who have not authenticated their accounts. They will be able to add items to the cart, but they cannot check them out until they are being authenticated. So that is why I'm adding blank equals to true, and then null equals to true. And then now we have associated the cart item to a specific user, and then now we need to associate that a cart item to a specific cart. Remember, we are having cart right here with cart ID as our cart, so we need to associate that item to a specific cart. Okay, so we'll say cart equals to models dot, it will be a foreign key because we want to link it to the cart, and say cart, and say let's say on delete models dot cascade. This means that if this cart is deleted, and then as well the cart items in that cart are deleted as well. And then let's have the product. Now we need to have the product. Okay, so to have the product we need to import the product model. So from products, remember we had created this app, from the products dot models import product. So we are technically importing these products. So we have this app, and inside our app models we have the product model. So we are importing this product. So we need to associate this product to be our cart item. So we'll say product equals to, it will be a foreign key, you close that, so it will be models dot foreign key, and then let us pass in our product, say product, and then let's say on delete models dot cascade. So this is basically to say if this product is deleted, as well as if this product exists as a cart item, it is being deleted as well. Now we also need to have variations. Okay, so if variations, remember our products have variations, so will be equals to models dot many to many, will be dot many to many field. And then for variations, we are using many to many field because you can have more than one variation for each product. So, and sometimes you can have none the variation. So I will add blank equals to true, and then let's say null equals to true. Okay, you can have these choices. And then let's have the quantity. Okay, so we have the quantity equals to, quantity is an integer field, so we'll say models dot integer field, and then let's have let's check if these cart items are active in the, that means they have not been paid for. So we need to have a boolean that tracks if these items have been paid for. So we'll say is active to be our boolean, and say models dot boolean field. It's a boolean field, and then we say, once we have done that, we need to have let me have a class meta. Let me ensure that we have uniqueness. So say unique together. So open that tuple and say I want the cut and the product to be unique. So I'll say cut, and then let us have a function that calculates the subtotal. Okay, so the subtotal will be calculated based on the product price times the quantity of these cut items. Okay, so we'll say div subtotal. Let me have an hyphen there. Subtotal takes in the self, and then let us return the subtotal. So we'll say return self dot product dot price. Remember, the product has the price. If we go to the product model, you can see the product has the price, and then we need to multiply that price times the quantity of these cart items times this quantity, multiply with against this quantity. So we'll say self dot quantity. Okay, and that is how we will get our subtotals from these cart items. Now let us return the string, and we'll say div string representation self, and then let me return self dot okay, this unique should be 1e. So self dot, what should I return? Should I return the product name? Return self dot product dot, let me see if the product name, okay, the product name, self dot product name. So this is our models. We have defined our model for our cart functionality. We have the cart itself, we have the cart ID, which will hold our cart ID, and in few seconds we will know how we will create these cart IDs. And then we have cart items, we will be linked to a specific user, and then we will be linked to the cart itself, and then the products variations, we have the quantity of those cart items and tracking if those are cart items have been paid for using this boolean. And then we have this function that calculates the subtotal by multiplying product price times the quantity of those cart items. And then we have this function that returns the string, which is a human readable string. So once we have this, we need to go back to our cart app. So here is our cart app. Go to admin. We need to register these models. So we'll say from dot models, let's import cart, and then we have cart item. Let's register these. So I'll say admin dot site dot register. So I'll register cart, and I will do the same for cart item. So I'll say admin dot site dot register, and then register as well cart. Okay, so here there should be I. So once you do that, you need to stage those changes before migration. So we'll do python manage.py make migrations. So we are getting this error, okay, variation missing one required position argument 2. Yes, I forgot. So we need to import variation from product. So we'll say variation. Okay, here we'll have variation, and then inside our variation we need to pass in that variation model. So ensure you change this so that you avoid getting that error. So let us try again. Let's try again. Let me clear the terminal, make migrations. Unexpected keyword argument. So let's see. Null. Okay, we have this null, it should be double L. Okay, and let us clear again and try again. Python manage.py make migrations. Yes, you can see we have this, and we are getting this warning that null has no effect to many fields, so we can remove that as well. So here, let me remove this null so that we don't get that warning. Okay, nice. And let's try again and see, make migrations. It is working perfectly. Now, once we have staged the changes, let's migrate so that those changes can be written into our database. So we'll say python manage.py migrate. Now they have been migrated. So if we go back to our admin interface, let me check if the server is running. It is not running. I'll have to clear the terminal and then try to run it again. So python manage.py run server. Now let's refresh. So here you can see we have this cart app, and then we have cart items and carts. So once we do that, now we need to create the add functionality function, and then we need to create a function that creates that cart ID. We said that a cart ID, we are going to grab the user session as our cart ID. Okay, so let's go back and create those two functions. So inside our cart, let me close this. So inside our cart app, let's go to views, and inside the views we need to create two functions. The first function is the function that creates the cart ID, and the second function is the function that allows the user to add the product to the cart. So let's start with the first function of creating cart ID. So I'll say div, and then like that, cart ID. Okay, I'm making that private, and then it takes in the request. Now let's say cart. We need to get our cart from the session, so we are going to grab the session key of that browser and populate it as our cart ID. So I'll say cart equals to request, cart equals to request dot session dot session key, and then let's check if not cart. So we'll say if not cart, if there is no session key grabbed already. So if not cart, we need to create it. Okay, so we'll say cart equals to request dot session dot create. Okay, so if there is no cart, if there is no session key already created as our cart, we need to create it, and then we return. So we say return cart. So this function will help us populate our cart ID inside our models by grabbing. We'll populate this because we are not going to enter it manually, so we want to track that cart of that user through the session ID. So that function will help us populate this cart ID, which is unique. Okay, so this ID will be always unique. Okay, now let's create add to cart function. So div, say add cart, and then it will take in the request, and as well we will pass in product ID as our argument. So we'll say product ID is as an argument. Okay, now we need to get the product first. So to get the product, we are going to use this function. Say we use get object or for. So this function will help us. It will check if that product is already in our database, and if that product does not exist in our database, and then it throws back a 4 error, which is the product does not exist. So we are going to do that. So we'll say product equals to get object or for. So we need also to import a product model. So we'll say from products dot models, from products, not products, from products dot models import product. So we are going to pass in that here. So product, say product, then let's as well pass in the ID and say our ID equals to product ID. Basically here what we have done is we are going to grab the product from our database, and if that product does not exist, we get a 4 error. That is why I'm using this get object or 4. Let's have we also need to grab product variations. Okay, so remember in our products model we have variations. So if we go back to models here, we have different variations for the product. We have variations. Okay, you can see we have variation category, and then we have variations. Okay, and these variations, you can see they are linked to the specific product. So we also need to grab those variations, because inside our cart template we need also we want to show those variations. So that is why we need also to grab, we need to extract variations from the products. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to define product variations and then initialize an empty list. So say product variations equals to an empty list, so that we will be appending those variations depending on the product. Okay, and then now we need to extract variations from the post data. Okay, so let me comment and say extract variations from post data. To do that, we need to check if the request is post. So we'll say if request.method equals to post, then we will go through the dictionary. Okay, we will grab the keys and values inside the items. So we'll say for key, we will loop through. So for key, and then for key value in request dot post dot items, and then let's have a try function. So let me say try pass, and let me have accept pass. So let's have a try. We want to try. So inside our try, we'll say variation equals to, we need to get all the objects of variation. So we need to import the variation as well. So here we say variation. Okay, so variation. So we need to get all the objects in the variation. So we'll say variation.object.get. So variation.objects get, and then we'll match those product. We'll check the product. So product equals to product. We need to have the variation category, okay, as our key, and then variation value as our value. Okay, so we'll say variation category I exact equals to this will be our key exact. Say this is the key, and then let's have our variation value as our value. Okay, so we'll say variation value, we need to get it exact, so I exact equals to value. So if we go to the product models here, you can see we have this variation category. This will be our key, and then we have this variation value as our value. Okay, so that is why we are grabbing them and then assigning them to these key value arguments. Here we need to append the variation, so we will say product variation. We need to append, remember we had initialized this product variation as an empty list, so we need to append these variations to this product variation. So we will say product variation dot append. We need to append that. We need to append the variation now. Say variation, right? And then we need for the accept, we need to accept variation does not exist, so we need to import that. So we'll go here and say from Django dot contrib dot exceptions dot contrib dot decorators. Okay, so for the accept, we need to accept variation dot that does not exist. We need to import that as well from the core. So we'll say from django.co.exceptions import object does not exist. Okay, so in our exceptions we are going to say variation dot object. Let me see what I imported. Object does not exist, and then pass, and then now we need to determine the cart ownership. So once we do this, let's move back. So here we need to determine the cart ownership. Let me comment this and say determine cart ownership. So to determine cart ownership, we need to check the user if is authenticated. So we'll say if request dot user dot is authenticated, user will be the logged in user, so user equals to request dot user, and then cart will be none. So basically what we are doing here, we are substituting the user and the cart. So if the user is authenticated, we need to assign the user as the owner of that cart, and the cart field will be empty. And else that means that user is not authenticated. We need to do the reverse of the above. So we will say else user will be none, and then the cart will be our session. Remember we created this function to generate our cart ID, so we want to substitute the user to the cart ID. Okay, remember we are also allowing non-authenticated users to add product to the cart. So this is how we are going to do. We say cart and then have that underscore equals to cart dot objects. So we are going to create it. So we'll say dot, we need to get or dot object dot get or create, and then we are going to use that function to populate our cart ID field. So we'll say cart ID equals to, let's now invoke that function to populate this. We'll say cart ID and then pass in the request. Okay, so this is how we are going to create. We are getting the cart as our object or create, That means that if we don't already have the cart ID, this cart ID populated, this one models here, if we don't have these populated already, we need to create it, and we are going to invoke this function. We are already created this function above here. It will help us to create that cart ID from the session of the user. So that is how we do it. And then we also need now to populate, we also need to check if the cart item already exists, because we don't want to have the same items. So this is the logic. If the cart item already exists, we only increment that cart item if the user tries to add that item to the cart again. Okay, so we just need to increment it instead registering it as a new product. Okay, so we are going to do that. And the checks here, we need to check if the product and variations match. So because sometimes you can have let's say a shoes which is black but different color, different sizes. Okay, those are two different products. So we are going to check both. If both match, then we increment that product. So let's do that. So here we say check if the cart item already exists, check. And then now we'll have cart items equals to, okay, we need now to import cart item model. So we'll go back here and say from dot models import cart item. So here we need to say cart item dot objects dot filter. We need to filter those objects. So dot objects dot filter those objects. As I said, we need to filter those objects to ensure that the same product and the user match, and as well the variations. Okay, so we'll say, we do this and say product equals to product. Remember, we are getting the product ID here, so we have this product ID, so we need to match that product ID first, and then we need to check the user and say user equals to user. You also need to check the user, and as well now we need to check the cart. So cart equals to cart. So we are going to filter these cart items using these three things. We need to check is that product, the user who added that product, and then the cart in which that product exists in. And now let us now work on variations to match all those variations. So let's have existing variation. We have this variable existing variation list. Let it be an empty list, and then let's have ID list. So ID list, we also need to get the IDs of those products, also an empty list. And now we need to loop through all the items in the cart items. So we'll say for item in cart items. So we need to loop through and then say existing variation equals to, now we need to say list, and then item, we get all the variations of that item. So say item dot variations variation dot all. Okay, so we are getting the existing variation first, and then we need to append these variations to the existing variation list. Okay, to do that we need to say existing variation list dot append existing variation. So we are getting each item's variations, you can see here, and we are converting those variations into a list and then appending those variations to the existing variations list. And then we also need to append the item IDs. So we will say ID list dot append, then we append the item ID, so item dot ID. Okay, so this is how we do it. Now we need to check if the product variation is in existing variation list, and if it's already exists, we need just to increment the quantity of that item. Okay, else we create a new cart item. So that is how we are going to do it. So let's check if the product is already exists. So what we'll do is we'll say if product variation in existing variation list, we are looping through all those variations to compare, and then now increase the cart item quantity. Let me comment this and say increase the cart item quantity. Okay, if it already exists, we just need to increase that quantity instead of adding a new product. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll say index equals to existing variation list. We pass in the product variation. So we pass in the product variation, say product variation. Okay, and then we also need to get the item ID. So we'll say item ID equals to ID list, and then we pass in the index. Okay, so as I said earlier, we need to check the product ID and the variation. If they match, if they already exist, we just increment the quantity of that item. Okay, this should be a list. So let me use the list. So it will be ID list index, and then now we'll have item equals to cart item dot object. Item equals to cart item dot objects dot get. We are getting that item, and say ID equals to item ID, and then we need to increment the quantity, so it will be item dot quantity, increment that quantity by 1, and now we'll have else. So here here we have checked if that product already exists, and if that product exists, we just increment that product quantity by 1, and now we need to create that product if it does not exist. Okay, so we'll say create a new cart item. So to do that, we'll say cart item equals to cart item dot object, cart item dot objects dot create. We are using create function, and then we say product equals to product, and then say quantity will be 1, quantity equals to 1, and then say cart equals to cart. Now if product variation, we say if product variation, we say cart item. We need to add those variations, so cart item dot variation dot add, and then we multiply. We take all the variations, say product variation, and then we save that cart item. So we'll say cart item dot save. So we have created a new entry. If there is no if this cart item does not exist in our cart, so we create new entry. We have created that new entry and we have saved. Okay, now once we save, everything is right. Now we need to return a message telling the user the cart item has been added to the cart successfully. So we are going to utilize Django messages here. I will import messages. So from django.contrib import messages. After saving our product, we need to go there and say messages dot success, text in the request, and then let's give in our message. Say something like the product has been added successfully to the cart, and then now return redirect cart. So we need to return once the item has been successfully added to the cart, we need to return the user to the cart. So we are going to use a redirect to redirect the user to a different page. So we say redirect, and then scroll down. Here we need to redirect the user, so return redirect cart. So this will be our URL. Cart will be a URL. So to do a recap what we have just done here, to explain these two functions that we have created. So the first function is to create the cart ID, to populate these cart ID. Okay, so this function is to create that cart ID, and it is going to get that cart ID from the sessions. And then we have this add cart function. So basically, add to cart functionality helps the customer add that product to the cart. We also have this code here that extracts this is not extract, so extract extracts the variations of the post, because we are going to determine if that product already exists in the cart, and if it exists, we just need to increment the quantity. If it does not exist, we create a new entry which has a quantity of 1. You can see we are using create function, and then we return a message to the user telling the user that the product has been added successfully to the and then we redirect the user to the cart where he can view the product that he added to the cart. So once we do that, we need to create a URLs. So I'll go to my carts app and create a new file called urls.py, and here we will have to create URLs. So we'll say from Django.urls import path, and then we need to import the views. So from dot import views. Now let us create our URL patterns. URL patterns equals to say path, and then pass in add to cart functionality. So say add to cart, and then we pass in the product ID, which is an integer. So we'll say int product ID, and then now we use that function. So remember, in our function here add to cart, we are passing in product ID. So that is why I'm adding this product ID as our integer, and then say views dot add to cart, and then let's give it a name. Say name equals to add cart. So let me say add cart. So we have this function. Now let's try to pass in this function to our template. So let's go to the product detail. If we go back here, we'll be able to see in our product detail we have this button. So we need to add this add to cart URL behind this button, so that whenever the user clicks, that button adds the product to the cart. So let's add that. So let's go to the templates, and inside templates let's go to products folder and then products detail, and inside our product detail let's look for that button of add to cart. Here, this is the button. Now here we need to add that URL link. To add it, we need to use Ginger. So we say URL add cart, add cart. Let me confirm the URL. Okay, add cart. Yes, add cart. And then we need to pass in the ID. So we'll say product dot. So let's go back here and refresh. Okay, no reverse match for this. So in my views, since we don't have this cart URL pattern, so let me redirect the user to home page. So I'll say home. So we will change this later on. Okay, so I get the error. So we had created the URL patterns for cart, but we have not included these URL patterns inside our project URL. So go back to Django e-commerce. Then under URL, these are project URLs, so we need to include those URLs here. So we'll say path and say carts, say something like that, and then have include carts.urls. Okay, so we have included this. Now if we go back to our browser and refresh, we'll be able to see this. So let me try to add again. No concentrate, not null, concentrate. Okay, is active. So let's go back to our cart models. Let's say is active. It can be null. Say null equals to true. Let's run migrations. Say python manage.py make migrations, and then python manage.py migrate, and let us try again this, as well as for the cart ID, since we said that this cart ID will be optional. If the user is authenticated, we take the user, and if the user is not authenticated, we take the cart ID. So sometimes this cart ID can be null, so we'll say blank equals to true, and then we need to have null equals to true. Okay, so let's now make migrations again. So we say python manage.py make migrations and python manage.py migrate. Okay, nice. So let us try again. Let's check if the server is running. Server is not running. Let me restart the server. Python manage.py run server, and then let's go to our browser and refresh. We have localhost, and then let's click on this product and try to add it to the cart. Not null concentrate cart items dot cart id. So yes, we need to add here for cart. We say blank equals to true, here blank equals to true, and null equals to true. So I believe this will be fixed. Let us make migration since we have made some changes to our our models. So python manage.py make migrations and then migrate. And now let's refresh this. Okay, so you can see the product has been added to the cart. So if we can add as well this product and say add to cart, you can see the product has been added to cart. Let's add again the same product. The product has been added to cart. So let's check it from our admin interface to see the cart. So you can see this cart, we have these two products that have been added to the cart items, and then the cart we have 0 since we have a logged in user. So let me log out this user and then add the product to the cart as an authenticated user and see what happens. So let me add this cannot cart which is not associated with a value. Cart objects or create. Oh yes, the error is here. We are using cart instead of the cart model. So let us import cart. So here we should have the cart, and then let's use this cart. So here we will use the cart model. Ensure this C was capital 1. Okay. So let's try again to refresh this to see if that error has been fixed. Yes, you can see the product has been added to the cart. Remember, this user is not authenticated. So if we go back to our admin, we'll be able to see the cart generated, cart ID generated. Okay, the string none type. So let's try to fix that. So to do that, let me convert this to a string. So let me say string, then say self dot cart id. Okay, and see if that will work. So let's refresh this. Okay, so you can see it is none. So that means our function is not working. As we also have this list existing variable index. We are also getting that, so we need to fix it. So index dot variation. Okay, this here should have dot index. Ensure that you add this. I forgot it. And now if we try to refresh again, you can see the product has been added successfully to the cart. So that is it for this video of part 1 of cart functionality. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you learned. If so, please give it a thumbs up and also like. See you in the next video. Bye bye.